There I am. There I am. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. How are you all doing? We are in for a great show tonight. It is good to be with all of you. Please do hit that like button as you come into the stream. I hope you are all doing well this evening. Sorry for the delay. Had to get some things set up. I got a little bit of a late start. It seems like today might be a little bit of a quieter night, but how about we try to fill the room up? Let's get the party started. Let's hit that like button if you have not yet. That helps boost the YouTube algorithm. Welcome everyone on Rockfin as well as Rumble. Thank you so much for supporting me on those venues, those independent outlets. I also want to give a big shout out to all the moderators in the chat. I see quite a few moderators in the chat. I see David, I see Joe, I see Desert Mantis, I see who else do I see? Where as well. So welcome to all the moderators. Welcome to all the YouTube members, Patreon subscribers, Substack members, everyone who supports this channel, buy me a coffee, etc. You can find all those links in the video description. It is the holiday season, so do consider supporting independent media such as this. Every cent, every annual membership or monthly membership on Patreon, Substack, or YouTube goes straight back into this work to help bring you incredible as possible programming from an independent perspective on geopolitics and global development. Once again, everyone, it is great to be with you. Can I get a sound check? How is my sound? We have a packed program today. There's a lot to talk about. We're going to get into so today, although there has been tragedy, I see people already in the chat talking about, I believe his name was Mr. Rafit, who was killed, a journalist. I know he was close to the folks at Electronic Intifada, Palestinian journalist. He was live from Gaza quite often on their channel. And so I just want to say rest in power to him and all of the Palestinian journalists who have been killed. Many of them been killed, of course, by Israeli forces, the onslaught still going on there. I will touch a bit on that. Dr. Rafit al-Arir, that is his name. I'm probably butchering it, but nonetheless, I want to say rest in power to him, rest in power to all those journalists that have been slain, all the children, all the people in general who have come under Israel's just barbaric slaughters, genocidal slaughter. So I just want to say that first, because we're not going to get too much into the death toll and that sort of thing tonight. We're going to talk about first Putin's visit to the Middle East. It's still, it has ended. It was a snap visit, just a single day total. He visited two countries, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and now is in Moscow meeting with President Raisi of Iran. And I'm going to go over those developments, what it means. Of course, Gaza has a huge reason to do with this pretty momentous visit. And if you don't believe me, you can believe the Western mainstream media, and we're going to get into that. Then we're going to get into Zelensky's big troubles. We know that Ukraine is in a pretty massive and dire situation. We're going to get into that, just how the Western mainstream media is talking about this and why it is leading up to a possible coup in Ukraine's government against Zelensky. And so that is all kind of building up within Ukraine's so-called government. Project Ukraine is spiraling into just absolute chaos, and I'm going to go over that. Then we're going to talk about China. China has just been attacked by Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, and also there is a China-EU summit to talk about and what it means for this ongoing hybrid war on China waged by the U.S. and its collective West vassals. So that's what we got going on today, everybody. But before we get started, please do continue hitting that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell. We are going to get started. All right. So I have a whole host of announcements for you guys, like a whole host of announcements. So you want to get more and more people in here because it's going to be quite a busy period, and a weekend streaming. I'll give away one. Tomorrow afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern, I will be on with Mark Sloboda, the geopolitical analyst based in Moscow. We are going to talk all things Ukraine. And generally, when it's a conversation with Mark, you can bet it is going to be incredibly in-depth. We're going to go over military, politics, economics, multipolarity. We're going to get into it all. So that's the first tidbit. That's only a little bit about what's going on this weekend, though, okay? So we're going to get started, and I will be sure to round out these announcements throughout the stream for all of you. Okay, so let's get to the first story now. Remember, hit that like button. Let's see where we are. 240 likes, about almost 600 people, 259. Let's try to get that up, 300, 400 likes as we move along here. Vladimir Putin has changed everything with this snap visit, as it has been called, or a rare visit, should we call it, from the Russian president to the Middle East. It only lasted about one single day total, and Vladimir Putin made his first stop to the United Arab Emirates. Then he headed to Saudi Arabia to meet with Mohammed bin Salman. Now he is in Iran. As of December 7th, he is in Iran speaking with the president, Raisi, in Moscow. And this rounds out what the Western mainstream media, the United States, the unipolarists are going crazy about. The fact that Vladimir Putin is not really sticking it in the eye of the collective West. What he's doing is he's demonstrating that Russia is indeed not isolated, that the calculus in the region of West Asia, amid this horrific assault that Israel is waging with the complete and total aid of the United States and unconditional solidarity of the United States, that Russia is a significant player in this region, if not a more influential player now than the United States in many respects, diplomatically, politically, and more and more so economically. So that is a game changer. That is something that has been happening quietly around and surrounding some of the other developments we've been talking about so much here and elsewhere. The Ukraine conflict, the war that is escalating and just absolutely out of control in Gaza. These developments kind of cloud a growing reality in the region as a whole. That is that the United States is losing an immense amount of ground by the day, by the month, and by the year. So Vladimir Putin made what has been called a snap visit by the collective West in a bid, they claim, to humiliate Joe Biden, to show, as Business Insider says here, but you can find this in basically every mainstream media outlet, comments on how Vladimir Putin seeks to humiliate Biden by showing that attempts to isolate Russia have failed. Now, certainly there is an equation. This does factor into the equation. It does factor into the equation that the United States has failed to isolate Russia, and that can be seen in all spheres, especially in relation to the sanctions regime that was imposed upon Russia. That has failed, and if that has failed, that means every other effort, including the attempt to mire Russia into a military quagmire in Ukraine, has also failed. So here you have the Business Insider, a pretty stable and reliable voice of the elite, the neocons, the Western ruling elite, ruling class, if we would. This is what they had to say. They said Russian President Vladimir Putin is making a rare trip. And of course, that peppered all the headlines in the Western mainstream media. Rare. He'll visit the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which he has already done. Putin is seeking to show attempts to isolate him over Ukraine have failed. And so this is what's interesting. They talk about how Putin's, only months ago, Putin's grip on power appeared to be loosening. The Russian president faced a coup from Wagner. Now, of course, we know that was overblown and not nearly any kind of threat to Russia's political stability. But at the same time, they say he was battling spiraling domestic economic woes caused by sanctions imposed in punishment for the Ukraine invasion. It was subject of an arrest warrant internationally over alleged war crimes by his forces. So again, as I said, the sanctions have failed. So there was no woes. There might have been a temporary hiccup, but it was so brief that it really didn't register. You couldn't really measure how badly it affected Russia because of how quickly they were able to pull themselves back up again and, in fact, surpass the expectations of anybody, maybe even Russia itself. But of course, this other development, Vladimir Putin being issued an arrest warrant by the ICC, was also irrelevant because guess who isn't even a signatory to the ICC? The United States, which is the principal force seeking the overthrow of Vladimir Putin himself. So it was always a big nothing burger. But here, the Western mainstream media loves to try to play up that Vladimir Putin was in somehow trouble over his policy decision and that of the Kremlin's around Ukraine or any other issue. But the Russian president is clawing back. He is making a rare trip to the Middle East as he seeks to embarrass Biden by showing him that attempts to isolate Russia have failed. So he went to the UAE, went to Saudi Arabia, two of the U.S.'s closest allies in the Middle East. It's among the first trips he's made abroad since the arrest warrant of March 2023 by the ICC, with neither of the Gulf states signatories of the convention, which the United States also isn't. Analysts told Business Insider that he would use a visit to try to drive a wedge between Washington and the Arab states and expose the limits of U.S. power, saying that he's exploiting rage over U.S. support for Israel. So here we have this attempt to show that Putin's government is reacting to the carnage in Gaza in ways that serve to boost Russia's soft power in the Arab Islamic world, while taking advantage of the opportunity to have international attention shift away from Ukraine. So all of this is seen as nefarious. Well, how do the Arab countries, how the UAE and Saudi Arabia, how did they react to his visit? And I have some great footage. First, let's see how the United Arab Emirates welcomed Vladimir Putin. Now, if this is Putin's attempt, all on his own, to wrestle away, I'm going to play this on silent because there is a really dramatic song, but I'll make some commentary instead because the music can get kind of tricky on these videos. But the point here is that Vladimir Putin is supposedly the one who is trying to show the world and is trying to take advantage and exploit issues that the United States is having. Well, the UAE or any other country for that matter doesn't really have any there's no gun being held to their head saying they have to show a certain degree of respect or anything or treat Vladimir Putin differently than any other leader. But nonetheless, here you have, watch this. Here you have the UAE. This is how they welcomed Vladimir Putin. So there you have the flags very high on the embassy. There you have the jet. You had Su-35s, by the way, escorting Vladimir Putin to his destinations, which was noted in the Western mainstream media. And it really was, that was a message to the United States and the collective West that Putin is not only well aware that he is a marked man, but he's also well aware that he can and Russia can defend themselves. So here we go. So there you have Vladimir Putin being given the hero's welcome. You have literally a red carpet being rolled out for him as his jet arrives. This was a really big event. One where he was approached by top UAE officials as he got off the plane. And of course, this was made into a spectacle, rightfully so, because what Russia is doing and what these countries are doing are showing that they are not. There is the carpet they are walking. It's not red, but it might as well be. This is how he was treated. This was a celebratory moment, basically treated like royalty. All right. And so that's how he was treating the UAE. They are very strong partners, these two countries, especially given their energy importance. So that's just the first example. Now, there's really interesting videos going around when Vladimir Putin went to Saudi Arabia. So here is Vladimir Putin and Mohammed bin Salman. Look at this greeting here. Have a very warm handshake, to say the least. And then you had the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia during the visit as he approached. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia put on a 6-minute video. A 6-minute video. I'm not going to play all 6 minutes, but here's a 6-minute video of Vladimir Putin coming to Saudi Arabia. And this was the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry posting a video about it. So here you have him being greeted by Mohammed bin Salman, cameras, heroes welcome. You have the limo, of course, and then you have him entering Riyadh, the Capitol building, and you have very friendly and warm imagery being taken here. No animosity. That this really is a message. This is a message being sent. He is being treated like a hero, like someone who is worthy of respect. And now this, as you can see, is in marked contrast to the awkward 2022 visit by Joe Biden, where he gave a fist bump of all things. I believe it was 2022, early 2023, where he gave a fist bump to Mohammed bin Salman. It was incredibly awkward. Talks were incredibly cold. And of course, the relations between Saudi Arabia and the United States have been in free fall. So here you just have the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia highlighting all of the major points, all of the respect that they are showing to Vladimir Putin. And this really is a message by all parties involved. Of course, it's a message from Russia that it isn't isolated. Russia has a huge part to play in this region, but it's also a message to from the Middle East, from Saudi Arabia, from the UAE, these two staunch U.S. historic allies now in BRICS. It's a message to the United States that they can't be bullied just because they have strong relations, okay? And here is what Al-Mayadeen had to say, that Putin was in Riyadh after the UAE in a snap one-day visit to the region. He arrived in Saudi Arabia for a sudden visit, engaging in urgent discussions with Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, which covered a range of topics such as the Israeli war in Gaza and Ukraine. So he arrived from the UAE and was only visiting the two countries for one day before he meets with Iran. And Putin said, we have stable relations in all fields of political cooperation, the economy, and humanitarian fields, Putin said to Mohammed bin Salman, adding, it's very important for all of us now to exchange information and assessments about what is happening in the region. The preparations for a summit in Russia have changed, but nothing will stop cooperation, according to Putin. The Middle East circumstances would improve as a result of Saudi Arabia and Russia's political collaboration, said Mohammed bin Salman. Thanks to political coordination between Russia and Saudi Arabia, security in the Middle East has been strengthened. Our subsequent political coordination and interaction will undoubtedly have a positive impact on the global situation in the entire Middle East, he said. Putin was heading a delegation including high-ranking officials from various fields: oil, economy, foreign affairs, space, and nuclear energy. Meanwhile, according to the Kremlin, the agenda of discussions of the two countries included oil, the Israeli war on Gaza, the situation in Syria and Yemen, regional stability, in addition to developments in Ukraine, as well as oil prices. So it's a pretty big deal, and the reception to Putin is also a pretty big deal. And of course, I think it's really important to highlight first, before we get to Iran, that the situations between Russia and the United States couldn't be any more different when it comes to how they approach this region, West Asia, the Middle East, whatever you want to call it, West Asia more accurately, given that the Middle East is just the map that the West drew up when it was carving up the region. But the two circumstances couldn't be any different. Vladimir Putin and Russia support stability. They support peace. They also support a Palestinian state. And thus, their political ideals align with all countries and all peoples of that region far more than the United States, which, of course, has been doing the exact opposite, supporting instability, chaos, and supporting not self-determination for Palestinians, but the onslaught, the expansionism, and the settler treachery and travesty that is Israel. So here is a demonstration of this. You have, for example, Vladimir Putin. He gave this talk, early on at the end of October in his response to what was going on in Gaza with relation to Israel's onslaught. And here's what he had to say in terms of supporting a full-fledged state of Palestine and also condemning the West's treatment of this issue. Here we go.
Like it when someone tells or acts not in accordance with their wishes. They only believe in their own exceptionalism. They believe that they can do anything. They do not want durable peace at the Holy Land. They need chaos in the Middle East. That's why they are discrediting those countries that insist on the immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, insisting on stopping the bloodshed, and are willing to make a practical contribution in the resolving this.
So what Putin is saying is that the United States, the West, they do not support stability. They do not support peace. They do not do what is required to ensure that the interests of the region are placed in the forefront.
Crisis, not trying to gain from this. Even the UN, the clearly stipulated position of the global community, is attacked and bullied and being discredited. I would like to emphasize this. In our approaches to the situation in the Middle East, unlike the Western stance, we have never had any wish to gain anything from that. We have always clearly stipulated our position, declared our position, and it hasn't changed across the years. We stand for the establishment of the full-fledged Palestinian state.
So Russia stands for a Palestinian state. Of course, most countries aren't going to deviate from international law, from the UN Charter, and from the resolutions that declare that the two-state solution is indeed the correct trajectory for the Palestinian and the Palestinian question, regardless of its limitations, which many viewers here, and of course many viewers who will come to see this, will object to. But the point is that Russia is the one adhering to international law and doesn't seek to gain from the chaos that the United States and the collective West are responsible for sowing. And that is a huge difference. That is a huge difference, because now the region, I mean, look what's happening. It's not a coincidence that Vladimir Putin is visiting Saudi Arabia and then going to Iran. There has been a huge shift in this region away from U.S. domination and hegemony and toward a Russia and China-led multipolar world. And this visit is a huge part of that. So here is Lloyd Austin to mark this difference, talking about strategic defeat for Israel. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it shows not just perhaps the perilous position that the United States finds itself in with its unconditional support for the absolute war criminality of Israel, but it also demonstrates that the United States understands that its position is weakening vis-a-vis such support. So here we go.
This kind of a fight, the center of gravity is the civilian population. And if you drive them into the arms of the enemy, you replace a tactical victory with a strategic defeat. So I have repeatedly made clear to Israel's leaders that protecting Palestinian civilians in Gaza is both a moral responsibility and a strategic imperative. This kind of a fight.
So, I mean, of course, that's a bunch of garbage because, first of all, Lloyd Austin, the United States military brass, certainly have no qualms about mass murder of civilian populations, and certainly understand, if there's any truth to this, they understand what it's like to make such grave tactical errors that it leads to strategic defeat. We could look at Vietnam, Afghanistan. We can go down the line where the United States' absolute cruelty and mass murder and destruction of regime after regime, government after government, nation after nation has proliferated and catalyzed massive resistance to it. And that is just the law of politics. And it's the law of war. The law of war is that if there is a more powerful force that is seeking to exploit and destroy and dominate, sure, you are going to get a massive amount of resistance to it. So Lloyd Austin there, though, I think is indicating a more important point in that you have the United States desperately trying to lecture Israel about protecting civilian population because it understands, I think everyone in the world at this point understands, except maybe for Israel, that what it is doing is actually going to lead not to some kind of victory, but a massive and monumental defeat, not just in the court of public opinion, but in terms of the future of the kind of state that Israel is. It is not historic. It is not historically unprecedented for a regime that marks itself as a settler colonial regime, one that is about several decades, if not a century, outdated in terms of what is acceptable to the Western ruling elite at this time, that such a regime may not make it through in perpetuity. It will not be a permanent. It will not exist in permanence because of its behavior, because of its cruelty, because of its policies. I mean, this is something the United States knows very well. This is an issue the United States knows a lot about, given that it has a long history of the same kind of cruelty in just a different context, both at home and abroad. So the United States' position is waning because this is who the United States has to rely upon. The United States has not done what Russia did. Blinken tried. Was Blinken treated the same way? Did Blinken get a carpet rolled out for him? Were there videos showing for example, the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia, 6-minute videos of celebrations and royal treatment for Antony Blinken? No. Did Joe Biden go? No. This shows where the United States is. The United States, if it can't lecture and it can't bully, if there aren't ears to listen and there aren't leaders willing to capitulate, then the United States is really in no position of power at all. Of course, these countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia still have strong relationships with the United States, but the fact that they're even willing to move so much closer to Russia like they have here indicates that there are big problems for the United States in the Middle East, especially when it comes to this absolute crime being committed in Gaza, this rolling war crime. So I want to show you now just a bit of coverage on Iran, because that is the last stop. Here's the Jerusalem Post. And this is, I think, a good, if there's anything about Zionists and Zionism in Israel to remember, it's that Zionism really is, for whatever you think of it, abhorrent or you love it. I mean, for me, I believe Zionism is truly an evil ideology. But no matter what you think of it, it is really an honest expression of the collective West. Zionism is not detached. It's not some special thing. It is an honest expression of what horrors come out of the collective West. And here you have the Jerusalem Post covering Russia's visit to Iran. Iran's visit to Russia, President Raisi's visit to Moscow, in a very honest way, how the collective West really sees it. So it says Iranian president heads to Moscow. Russia state media said that Iran and Russia's presidents intend to discuss trade and economic cooperation, while Iran's pro-regime media highlights Gaza as an important subject. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi is heading to Moscow, and so the meeting will come in the wake of Putin's trip to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. As such, Russia will have done an important outreach to numerous countries in the region. According to the Russian media, the Iranian leader is going to Moscow to discuss trade and cooperation. Iran also supplies Russia with drones and defense ties important to the two countries. Gaza is an important subject in the Russia-Iran talks, Iran's pro-regime Tansim media said. Russian President Vladimir Putin will hold talks in Moscow with President of the Islamic Republic, Ibrahim Raisi, who will arrive in Russia on a working visit, said Russian state media. It's planned to substantively consider the current bilateral cooperation with the focus on implementation of promising joint projects in trade and economic areas, including transport and energy. So historic regional allies, it says Russia and Iran leaders met September 2022 in Uzbekistan during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. Russia and China both oppose the U.S. and seek to leverage forums such as the SCO and BRICS, the Association of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, to work against the West. So here is the Jerusalem Post saying what usually is the quiet part very loudly. It's saying that multipolarity is indeed the threat here to the West, and this meeting represents that. Other countries in the region are also seeking closer ties with Russia, Iran, and China. Turkey, which also works with Moscow and Tehran, also opposes the West and has frequently bashed Israel in the wake of the October 7th attack. These countries have not condemned Hamas as well, with Iran openly backing this genocidal terrorist group. Therefore, these meetings have increased potential ramifications for Israel as well as Russia's war in Ukraine. That might not say anything very substantively, but what you can read between the lines through that, especially that last sentence, that last statement, is that what Israel sees here is Russia's move toward the Middle East as possibly threatening the U.S. and the West, which is completely backing its reign of terror in Gaza and, of course, surrounding Palestinian territories. And that this is a big problem because they haven't sufficiently condemned terrorism and Hamas and all of this, that this is showing itself to be a troublesome alliance and will have ramifications, says the Jerusalem Post, which is a mouthpiece of the Israeli government. So huge visit, and here are the results. Okay, this is what Putin and the Iranian leadership under Raisi had to say. Russia and Iran are building momentum. Moscow and Tehran have developed strong ties over the past years and have boosted their respective economies, said Putin, telling to his Iranian counterpart, Ibrahim Raisi. The Iranian president arrived to Moscow on a state visit Thursday. The two leaders discussed both bilateral ties and wider global challenges, including the conflict in Gaza. Russia and Iran had built good momentum over the years. Over the past year in particular, Putin told Raisi, pointing to cooperation, energy, and education. The states are also investing in railroads, which are destined to become part of the international north-south transport corridor, which, if you follow the work of Mr. Pepe Escobar, especially on this program, he has talked a lot about this as being a critical lifeline for independent development in the region, away from the U.S. and Europe's predatory tentacles. A network of sea, rail, and highway routes spanning 7,200 kilometers, this INSTC is designed to link Russia's city St. Petersburg on the Baltic Sea to Mumbai in India through the Caspian Sea and Iran. The project, the genesis of which dates back to 2002, involves 11 nations. None of them are the United States, by the way. The INSTC is intended to have the time needed to ship goods from the Baltic to India and double the cargo turnover on the route. It's expected to be twice as efficient as moving goods through the Suez Canal, according to some media reports, which, of course, Israel and the United States and, of course, the West would have a huge problem with, since that's the canal that they want to continue to exploit for regional domination. In May 2023, Moscow and Tehran signed an agreement on the construction of a railroad linking the Iranian cities of Astara, which has a port city in the Caspian Sea, and Rasht. It is the last remaining part of the railroad network of the corridor that still needs to be built, according to Russian media reports. According to Putin, bilateral trade between the two nations has already grown by 20% over the past year and reached $5 billion a route. We are engaging in active cooperation among the entire spectrum of our bilateral relations. Raisi hailed the two nations' progress in the fields of energy, agriculture, and education, but said that further steps could be made to deepen cooperation in all areas, which be in the interests of our states and our peoples. The Russian president expressed hopes for the Eurasian Economic Union, which includes Russia, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, would be able to sign a free trade agreement with Iran by the end of the year. So this is interesting. It says that Putin poked fun that he considered landing in Tehran yesterday as he was flying over Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and he had to fly over Iran on the way back to Russia. He thought he could just land in Tehran and meet him right away, but according to Putin, he was informed that the Iranian president was already in the midst of catching his flight. Raisi responded by saying that Iran was ready to receive Putin's plane at any time and invited the president to visit Iran. Putin accepted the invitation and will avail himself to the opportunity when the time comes. Very friendly, very cordial, and huge and massive in terms of potential consequences. I mean, we're talking about a relationship between Russia and Iran that is going to build and is going to be part of building in an independent network of trade through this north-south corridor, which will bypass the United States and Europe's preferred way of dominating the region. That's a game changer, as Pepe Escobar often says here. So overall, what we are seeing Russia, we are seeing the Middle East, we're seeing the West Asia. We are seeing these two forces come together and begin the process, which still has a long way to go, but begin the process of extracting this predatory disease that is U.S. hegemony, that is Western domination, and relying on their own resources, their own political relationships, independent of U.S. meddling. This is a huge deal. This is what I mean by changing everything. Because when you have the Western mainstream media freaking out as they did, you know that regardless of how impactful the individual meetings and what comes out of them is, because all of these things take time, and of course whatever agreements come about are not necessarily going to bring fruits in the immediate sense, but you know that whatever comes out of that is secondary to the fact that Russia did this, Putin did this, and that these countries that were once staunch, not just staunch U.S. allies, because I think that is a generous characterization. They were staunch U.S. clients. They weren't allies. Allies means that you were on equal footing. These countries like the UAE, like Saudi Arabia, were staunch U.S. clients. Yet, Vladimir Putin and Russia, and of course China, as the Jerusalem Post couldn't help but cite, are big parts of helping facilitate a more sovereign and independent West Asia, one that will hopefully be more prepared as it becomes more economically and politically sovereign, more prepared to step up and step in when something like Gaza is going on. That's why I played that video too of Putin, because when Putin says these things about respecting international law, when he says these things that Russia's approach is much different than the United States's on this region, he's telling the truth, and that truth is reverberating across the region as even the most staunch U.S. clients. Iran, of course, is different. Iran was interested in BRICS well before these countries. Iran has been working with Russia and China deeply well before these countries began to even think about such a thing. Iran, of course, is a sovereign country and in perpetual hybrid war because of its stance and position in politics. But nonetheless, the fact that you have U.S. clients so willing to not just welcome Putin, but to embrace Putin and to embrace Russia, and of course, we've seen the same with China, shows that this visit is part and parcel of a larger process of ending U.S. hegemony, ending U.S. militarism, ending the reign of U.S. dominance in this region, which also means we are closer to a situation where the people of Palestine and, of course, the people of the entire region are no longer terrorized by the Zionist entity as well. So all of this has huge consequences for the future of this region. And Vladimir Putin, in just a single day, really just 24 to 36 hours, has changed the calculus in this region, has exposed that Russia is not isolated and the world is no longer the US's to rule. So that's it for the first story, everyone. We're going to get to the next one really quick on Ukraine. But before I do, we have 1778 now in the stream. Welcome, everybody. We have a lot of announcements to get to. I'm just going to quickly go through some of them. We have Mark Sloboda coming on tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. I am going to actually put that already in the chat so you can hit that notification. You can find the link in the chat. Be sure to come by 1 p.m. Eastern time to hear Mark Sloboda, geopolitical analyst based in Moscow. He is a great guest, and he is someone who we're going to talk about Project Ukraine and so many more things, I am sure, for what will be a very in-depth conversation. So the link is in the chat now. Go find that. Be sure to hit that like button. We have 1,752 people. We're going to get to the Ukraine topic soon. 748 likes. Let's get that up to 1,000 likes as soon as possible because that helps boost the YouTube algorithm. And of course, if you are interested and you can, it's the holiday season. This channel relies on the support of its viewers, of course, to remain sustainable. So please do subscribe as a member on Patreon. There's annual memberships. There's also YouTube membership, Substack membership, and one-time options like buy me a coffee in the video description. All right. That's the best way you can support this work. But I appreciate you all nonetheless. I do shout outs at the end, and I will get to all of you, including all those generous super chatters, in the conclusion of this program. So we're going to get to the next story. Okay. Let me just quick water break. Let's keep it going. All right. We have 1696 now. So let's keep hitting that like button. Let's keep getting people in. Hello, Rumble. Hello, Rockfin folks. Thank you so much. All right. Let us get to Project Ukraine now. This is going to be a doozy. This is this is going to be a doozy, everyone. We have a lot to get to when it comes to Project Ukraine. Maybe too much to get to. So here we go. The situation for Ukraine is truly spiraling out of control. What once was the hope of the Great White West, should we say the Great White Whale of the collective West, to conquer the Russian bear, to essentially put Russia down, keep it down forever. That effort has not just been a failure, but now has transformed into something quite different. It has become a defeat for both Ukraine and the collective West as a whole. This conflict has spiraled out of control. Russia's advantages have become too obvious to avoid and to ignore. But now there is a great awakening, so to speak, that we've seen in the Western mainstream media, trying to cover the tracks of the neocons and the warmongers who provoked and then attempted to push this conflict into a state of permanence in an attempt not just to satisfy the interests of the profiteers of war, like the military-industrial complex, but also to satisfy the aims of those neocons who see Russia's defeat not as a short-term possibility, but a long-term objective. Nonetheless, all of it has been laid to ruin. So here you have the Financial Times with breaking news, they say. Here's this post on X. The White House has issued a warning that the U.S. will run out of funds to Ukraine by the end of the year. Here's Alan McLeod, a great journalist over at Mid-Planet Press, with the meme of Zelensky being dropped by Biden, like in Toy Story. I don't want to play with you anymore. Now, this is actually quite serious because it's not just the Biden administration. It is also those forces like neocon Lindsey Graham, which had once been so enthusiastic for Ukraine, now pivoting because of the situation being so grim. Here is what Lindsey Graham had to say about on State of the Union at CNN, what he had to say about Ukraine's future in terms of funding.
So I will not vote for any aid until we secure our own border. Reform asylum, reform parole is possible to do. Democrats don't want to do it. All Republicans want to do it. I'm not helping Ukraine until we help ourselves. So I will not.
Okay, I just want to say one thing. Dana Bash here literally looks like the Joker. That's not. It's not about like. I mean, I just can't help but make this comment, especially at the end here. I mean, Dana Bash just looks like the Joker. I just had to say it. Sorry if that offends anybody, but so nonetheless, that's just the beginning of it, because you have this funding bill in Congress that's not going through. Nobody's voting on it. Joe Biden's all on his own, and I'm going to show you how lonely he really is very soon. But you also have Ukraine. You have the neocons like Lindsey Graham, and then you have Ukraine. Zelensky's top-ed says high risk of defeat coming. Andrei Yermak has called for more funds for Kiev as Congress remains at loggerhead. Zelensky's chief of staff admits that there is a big risk that Ukraine will lose its conflict with Russia unless U.S. Congress approves the $100 billion that's supposed to be for Kiev, or Israel, and Taiwan. Republican lawmakers are adamant that they will not approve the spending unless Democrats compromise on the southern border security issue. Yermak made the case for more funding during an appearance at the U.S. Institute for Peace, a Washington-based think tank. He claimed, yes, which is a literal U.S. government think tank. He claimed that his country had inflicted casualties on Russia's forces at a ratio of 1 to 10. It was capable of defeating it on the battlefield in the long run. But he admitted the delay in the provision of aid could pose a challenge for Ukraine. It would give the big risk that we can be in the same position where we can be in the same position where we are located now. Of course, it's a very high possibility, impossible to continue to liberate and give the big risk to lose the war. So, of course, there's some translation issues there. But nonetheless, first of all, Yermak is a complete and utter liar. It is not a 10-to-1 ratio. Give me a break. Ukraine is running out of men, and you have, it is quite obvious. Media Zona, the Pussy Riot tracker of Russia's casualties. There is no comparing. We went over this in the program before, but nonetheless, he is admitting, even if it is with some consternation and with some propaganda, that they are potentially going to lose. So, and it gets worse. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few things. So here you have the Washington Post saying that the Ukraine had ignored U.S.'s counteroffensive strategy, said the Washington Post. And over a dozen Post employees interviewed more than 30 senior officials from Ukraine, the U.S., and the EU. Only a handful identified by name. The conclusion was that a counteroffensive born in optimism has failed to deliver its expected punch, generating friction and second guessing between Washington and Kiev. And this is Washington. This is the United States, the neocons, throwing Ukraine under the bus, because that's what the United States does. This is what happens when you get in bed with Uncle Sam. You will not be happy. It's not going to be a long-term relationship. You're going to get dumped. And worse yet, you may lose a lot from it. And that is exactly what has happened. But I want to show you now the Washington Post article quickly here. So this is the Post article. Okay, this is the map. And this is the title: Miscalculations, Divisions Marked Offensive Planning by the U.S. and Ukraine. And here you have a map. And this is what I think is most important. I'll go over some of these points. So here's what they're saying. They say that Ukraine wanted to attack with its forces at 3 distinct points along the 600-mile front line here. And there you have the arrows to Bakhmut, through the Zaporozhye province to the land bridge, and then Melitopol. While the U.S. had urged the bulk of the forces, you see this darker arrow ever so slightly, should be focused on one axis toward Melitopol. So here's what they had to say in terms of the key elements that shaped the outcome of the counteroffensive. Ukrainian, U.S., and British officers held 8 major tabletop war games to build a campaign plan, but Washington miscalculated the extent to which Ukraine's forces could be transformed into a Western-style fighting force in a short period, especially without giving Kiev air power integral to modern militaries. So that sounds like you're blaming yourself a bit while blaming Ukraine, huh? U.S. and Ukrainian officials sharply disagreed at times over strategy, tactics, and timing. The Pentagon wanted the assault to begin in mid-April to prevent Russia from continuing to strengthen its lines. The Ukrainians hesitated, insisting they weren't ready without additional weapons and training. So what this sounds like is that Ukraine didn't want to just throw themselves into the slaughter, although they ended up doing so. The Ukrainian government threw all of its forces into the slaughter. But the United States wanted it done even quicker. Doesn't sound out of the question for the United States. U.S. military officials were confident that a mechanized frontal attack on Russian lines were feasible with troops and weapons that Ukraine had. The simulations concluded Kiev's forces, in the best case, could reach the Sea of Azov and cut off Russian troops in 60 to 90 days. The United States advocated a focused assault on the southern axis, but Ukraine's leadership believed its forces had to attack 3 distinct points on the 600-mile front, which I just showed you. The intelligence community had a more downbeat view than the U.S. military, assessing the offensive had only a 50-50 chance of success given the stout multi-layered defenses Russia had built up over the winter and spring. So, not even agreement within the DC neocon apparatus. Many in Ukraine and the West underestimated Russia's ability to rebound from battlefield disasters and exploit its perennial strengths, manpower, minds, and a willingness to sacrifice lives on a scale that few other countries countenance. Again, BS, because Russia has been fighting a war of attrition to protect its soldiers. And let's be honest here, the casualties for Ukraine have dwarfed that of Russia by many fold. So, as the expected launch of the offensive approach, Ukrainian military officials feared they would suffer catastrophic losses, while American officials believed the toll would ultimately be higher without a decisive assault. Nonetheless, regardless of no one seems to be right in this situation, but this shows the kind of dirty laundry that they are trying to clean up now after the mess has been made. It is not working, and it has sown huge rifts. And here's just a few of them. Okay, you have Zelensky abruptly canceling a U.S. Senate briefing, so he didn't go, which is a pretty big deal because he is a puppet. But he didn't end up going because the Senate, of course, was not going to pass anything, and he would have been wasting his time. And then you also have the fact that here's the Kiev Post talking about Zelensky, and 17 million shells. Report alleges rift between Ukraine's leaders. Zelensky's alleged complaints about Zelensky's office and his unusual request to the Pentagon chief indicate a rift between Ukraine's civilian and military leaders, according to the Ukrainska Pravda source. In a meeting, so here's where the tensions are. In a meeting with Lloyd Austin, Defense Department chief of the United States, on November 20th, Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine, Valery Zelensky, allegedly said that he requires 17 million shells and 350 to 400 billion in forces and funds to achieve the goal of liberating Ukraine. The anonymous source cited in the UP article, The War Against Politics, What Is Really Going On Between Zelensky and Zelensky, said Austin was surprised that, to put it mildly, because there are not that many shells in the whole world. Additionally, the source claimed that Zelensky complained to Austin about interference from the president's office. The source said, well, it's clear the president also found out about such conversations, and they don't promote trust. So nonetheless, here you have Zelensky absolutely out of his mind, and you have Zelensky all, trying to interfere. In what way, we don't know, but we know that there are rifts, and we've known this for quite a while. So I'm going to put on the folks of the Duran to react to this because I think it's important. They're going to talk about the power struggle because it really does point to a very grim future for Ukraine and Zelensky in particular. So here we go.
Happening in Ukraine, it looks like you have Zelensky and his team, Zelensky, Podolyak, Yermak on one side. It seems like you have Zelensky, I would say Klitschko now, perhaps Poroshenko, and some other oligarchs, perhaps, on the Zelensky military side. And then you also have the Budanov SPU intel, which it's hard to say where exactly they're tilting towards. You had this poisoning incident of Mariana Budanov, and perhaps the Budanov is just kind of sitting back and waiting to see what happens. Maybe he wants to seize power. Who knows? But something is happening in Ukraine. Maybe we won't have a coup or a Maidan 3. Maybe Zelensky will get certain intel from Budanov and he'll be able to prevent something like that happening. But I think it's pretty safe to say now that plots are being hatched.
Plots are being hatched, and they are clearly moving to some kind of,
I just want to say I'm glad I'm not the only one that has problems with sirens. Just going to put that out there.
an event, some kind of a showdown. Now, can I just say, of course, it's very interesting that Arestovich talks about Maidan 3 as an alternative to a coup. Most people would say that Maidan 2 was a coup. But anyway, there we go. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, how do you remove from office against his will a constitutionally elected president and claims that this is not a coup? I mean, it's presumably some sort of a coup. I mean, he's not suggesting, as far as I can tell, an impeachment process, which apparently the Ukrainian system would make extremely difficult. So one way or the other, what Arestovich is talking about is a coup, either a coup, which is the normal classical coup, troops on the streets.
So this is in reference to Alexei Arestovich has continued to make comments about the political tensions that I have mentioned earlier that the Kiev Post reported on, but not fully.
Police people rounding up prisoners, that kind of thing, the kind of coup that we're familiar with from Latin America and other places. Or alternatively, he's talking about another kind of coup, protests in the streets, squares being occupied, that kind of thing. But
I think
again,
that's the distinction. Yeah,
that's the distinction.
That's the distinction he's trying to make. Yeah, whether it's military guys or whether it's going to be people on Maidan Square.
Exactly. And by the way, we are already seeing small protests so far, but they are growing in Kiev. They're there all the time. Even the British media is picking them up now. People are demanding rotation of their loved ones who are in the army and that kind of thing. And they're apparently appearing on the Kiev subway, all kinds of things of that kind. But put that aside, let's not talk about the mechanics of this. It's absolutely clear that there is now a growing movement within the Ukrainian political military leadership to try to get Zelensky out. And they're all of them looking for ways to do it. They haven't yet settled on a way.
I mean, look at if Zelensky is saying there's interference from the president's office on helping to liberate Ukraine, meanwhile making maybe more drugged out kind of claims or requests to the United States, 350 to 400 billion, almost half of the entire military budget of the open, or at least public military budget of the United States in just shells alone. Regardless, to throw Zelensky under the bus like that, to essentially your paymaster, Lloyd Austin, one of the biggest ones, is a pretty grave indication that there are plots and plans to undermine Zelensky's position.
And Zelensky is very well aware of this, and he wants to remain where he is. You've had his wife saying that she doesn't want him to stay as president for another term, which you could argue is that she's trying to persuade her husband to bend to all this pressure, to step down. I mean, that's what it looked like to me. But Zelensky himself appears determined to stay. I think the people around him, people like Yermak, Podolyak, and the others, also obviously want him to stay. And a couple of days ago, Zelensky went on this very strange and mysterious tour of the various military people on the front lines. He went to Kherson, he went to Kupiansk, he met with all the generals. He came back and made an announcement about Ukraine building fortifications. It was all very muddled and not entirely clear, but it looked as if he was saying that Ukraine is going to go onto the defensive from this point on. My own sense is that he was going to the military, trying to shore up support with them, and that he didn't speak to Zelensky, who's clearly he sees, and probably rightly, as one of the key plotters. But my impression was that what he was doing was telling the military, look, back me. What is your price? And the military said, look, the soldiers, the generals said, look, if you want us to back you, the minimum thing you have to do is to stop these offensives, these attacks. Let us go on the defensive. We're just frittering away our resources by doing that.
Which is happening, which just happened in Marianka, I believe it was. It's happening in Avdiivka. They are retreating more and more. They're not going on the offensive anymore. The Western mainstream media is talking about war of attrition for the Ukraine side for the last several months. This shows that indeed this is not just about external forces, but there's a lot of internal turmoil. Of course there would be, given the grave consequences that the way this conflict has been fought for Ukraine. I mean, this is what happens when you get in bed with Uncle Sam.
So Zelensky, who up to this point has insisted on attacks being conducted on every part of the front lines, went back to Kiev after meeting these military people, and as part of whatever deal or attempted deal he tried to close with them, agreed that Ukraine is on the defensive from this point on and is going to try and build fortified lines. More difficult to do, by the way, than say, but that is what it looked like to me. Of course, whatever deal Zelensky thinks he's cut with the generals might not really be a deal at all in their eyes. We'll just have to see how it all plays out. But clearly, lots of things are going on. You've got rumors swirling around. You have MPs from Zelensky's party sniping all the time at Zelensky. There's clear indications that Zelensky wants to sack Zelensky because he clearly sees Zelensky as the chief plotter. You also get rumors and speculations about what Zelensky himself is up to. Zelensky is keeping very, very quiet. He wasn't at this meeting with the other generals. And there's been reports of telephone conversations between Poroshenko and the former president, who's also an oligarch, and another big Ukrainian oligarch, Rinat Akhmetov, who I believe is not physically in Ukraine at the moment. But anyway, lots of things moving on. The chessboard is moving. And clearly, there is within Kiev now a consensus amongst perhaps the predominant bloc within the Ukrainian establishment that Zelensky has to go.
Zelensky has to go. I mean, this is what we've been saying here on this program for quite a long time, that this was what was going to happen, that the rudiments of this are being built up, the foundations for Zelensky's ultimate ouster are coming. The United States has intimated a real interest in elections in Ukraine. You heard the Alexander Mercouris talk about these oligarchs maneuvering maybe into a political role and having strong communication with pretty major forces in the Ukrainian political establishment at this time. So we're going to see, I think, a realignment over time. Zelensky is going to be more isolated because what's happening is the conflict has changed course entirely. This is no longer the conflict that NATO had set out for itself in the beginning. This is no longer the conflict that Ukrainian leadership under Zelensky had willfully parroted on behalf of NATO and the United States at the beginning of February 2022. This is now a conflict on Russia's terms. And given that, there has to be a new realignment, a new orientation to save face and to stabilize whatever can be stabilized for the future of the conflict. Because no doubt, people like Zelensky do not want to give up on the fight. They want the fight to go on to benefit them, to benefit their position. This is what happens to coup governments. I've always called Ukraine a coup government, not because there's an absence of elections. Because you're a coup government does not mean there's an absence of elections. This is the narrow thinking of an ignorant collective West, of an ignorant population in the collective West. No, coup governments just mean that they are governments produced by a coup. If you hold elections a couple of years later, it doesn't mean that government is not a coup government, because who administers the elections? Those who participated in ultimately waged the coup. You literally have Poroshenko trying to make a revival that wouldn't happen if there was truly, quote unquote, democracy in Ukraine. You also wouldn't have the re-legitimization and the outright celebration of the worst forces of World War II, those NAZIs that, of course, made up a huge bulk of the impetus and the motivation for the conflict with Russia. So all of this is to say is that this was always going to end really badly, because we don't have a story in history where governments that are outcomes of coups, especially foreign-backed coups, U.S.-backed coups, Western-backed coups. We don't have a long history of those governments being stable, being successful. We can go all over the African continent, all over Latin America, all over Asia. And every time a coup has happened, instability, chaos, and ultimately the demise of that government in some way, shape, or form occurs. That's what happens because they are not legitimate. They are simply battering rams for a larger political and economic agenda, generally led by the United States and the collective West at this time, and especially over the last 70 or so years since the end of World War II. So Zelensky finds himself in a complete and utter dangerous position, utterly dangerous position, one in which may not be salvageable. Zelensky is likely going to have to go. We don't know how it's going to happen. Will he fall slain somehow, poisoned? Will he be killed outright? That is not an impossibility. Will he be elected out? Will he be overthrown? Will there be a Maidan redux? We don't know. But what we do know is that because the conflict in Ukraine has changed, because Russia has won, Ukraine now, with the, if we can call it, aid from the United States and the collective West, are going to have to put back the pieces together in some way, shape, or form to realign, readjust, and move forward. Because as I always say on this program, the objective to target Russia, to destroy Russia, is not over. It is just that the Ukraine project, the Project Ukraine, as some call it, is essentially over in terms of its ability to achieve its intended objectives. The fighting may continue. More people may die on all sides. Ukraine will deteriorate and disintegrate in many various ways in the very near future. But nonetheless, what we are going to see is patchwork. We're going to see instability and chaos, and we're going to see the end of Zelensky very soon. All right, everyone, we are headed to the next story. We have 1,900 viewers, that's over 1,000 likes. Thanks so much. Keep hitting that like button. It helps boost the algorithm, helps get more people in this stream. As I said before, I have Mark Sloboda coming on at 1 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. So if you are interested in that, because Mark Sloboda is a great geopolitical analyst, I'm going to put that in the chat. I will also, all right, here's the link. So you can join in tomorrow. Hit that notifications bell here as well as on that stream. Rumble and Rockfin, you will be notified. You will get notifications once it is up. But with all that said, I'll give you a few more announcements. On Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, I'm going to have Richard Medhurst on talking about Gaza, Palestine, Israel, and of course, all the other developments from Ukraine to West Asia to China and on and on and on. And I'll save the last announcement for the end. So 2 p.m. Eastern time, Saturday, December 9th, Richard Medhurst will be joining the program. All right. And we'll talk about his censorship as well, because he was taken off of YouTube, or demonetized, I should say. All right, everybody. We're going to get to the last story. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell, and go to the video description. It is a holiday season. If you want to give, you want to support independent media, the best place is to become an annual member on Patreon. You get many perks, suggest guests, ask questions. You also get a free PDF copy of my book on American exceptionalism, and so much more. There's annual options in Patreon. You can go to the video description and find that link. Substack, YouTube membership are all also great places, as well as one-time options like PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. So with that said, we have one more story. All right. That story is going to involve China, because China doesn't get as much coverage these days. But nonetheless, its importance and the conflict surrounding China has not gone away. All right, we have to be cognizant of that. China remains a very important part of the geopolitical calculus, especially for the hegemonists, the United States, and the unipolarists in the collective West. All right, so we're going to get to that. I'm going to take a swig of water, and we're going to get right to it. No sirens yet today. How about that? It must be a good night in the neighborhood. How's everyone doing, though? How's everyone doing? I hope. Where are you all coming from? I keep forgetting to ask that of late. I know I have a pretty global audience at this point. So yeah, we're going to get started on China. China now, this topic we're going to get into is going to talk about the economic war, which Gina Raimondo, the Commerce Secretary, has at the Reagan Defense Foundation. She's kind of spilled the beans about what the U.S.'s agenda truly is. And I'm going to talk about why it is just absolutely fantasy to think that this is going to work, because it's not going to work. Not one bit. So we're going to get started. Okay. Let's get started. So hold on one second. Sorry, I'm just pulling up a source. Give me a second, everyone. Stick around. All right. Okay. I have a lot of generous super chats today. A lot of generous super chats today. Thank you so much to everyone. I'm going to get to shout outs of everybody. At the end, we have a lot of interesting announcements, including tomorrow, Mark Sloboda. The next day, 1 p.m. Eastern. The next day, we will have Richard Medhurst. Okay, Richard Medhurst, 2 p.m. Eastern time, Saturday, December 9th. All right. I'm not I don't think I'm lagging today, am I? I'm getting messages. No, I am not. All right, good. Let's get started, everyone. We still got 1,600 people to end the night. This one will be a briefer story, I think, a shorter story, but nonetheless an important one. So let's do it. The United States, the neocons, the warmongers in the DC military apparatus have always bet on a losing economic war to complement their aggression toward China, their aggression against China in the Asia Pacific and the world at large. The United States, remember, has as its national security imperative and objective the containment of China alongside of Russia. That is the strategic priority of the United States' Defense Department, State Department, the intelligence agencies all across the board, even if it is not in the news right now, given the situation in Gaza, Ukraine, and other matters. But nonetheless, this economic war generally is focused much more when it comes to Russia, because Russia is subject to thousands of sanctions, and the United States has sanctions on more than 30 countries in the world, making up over a third of the population of the world. And China is actually a big part of this. The United States has been leveling tech sanctions and sanctions of all kinds onto China for many years now. And of course, the big target where the United States is attempting to make the most impact is on China's growing technological and scientific capacity and gains, because China is leading the world in essentially almost all fields. And as I've shown before from the Australia Strategic Policy Institute, a literal State Department think tank, one that is funded by the Department of Defense in Australia as well as the United States government, that have made this think tank has made just egregious claims about Xinjiang and other matters. This think tank had to admit that 37 out of the 44 emerging technologies in the world, the highest forms of technology in the world, are led by China. So Gina Raimondo, you might remember her. She's the Commerce Secretary, and the Commerce Secretary actually has the most influence over the implementation of sanctions by the United States. She visited China not too long ago. She visited China earlier this fall of 2023, and she was very friendly during the meeting. But then China decided to release its Huawei Mate Pro 60 phone, which had advanced chips, 7-nanometer chips, that were considered impossible for China to acquire. And she was shocked by this, and she had not such great things to say. Well, Gina Raimondo has been commenting again, and here's the Reagan Defense Forum that she was attending. This is Defense News, really an outlet of the Pentagon, saying that the Commerce Secretary, the Commerce Department needs a bigger budget to help the U.S. outpace China on technology, said Gina Raimondo at the Reagan Defense Forum. She used her speech at the event to give a pitch for more funding from Congress, particularly for the Bureau of Industry and Security, which handles export controls. It needs to be funded so we can do what we need to do to protect America. So Gina Raimondo attended this defense forum, okay, by this right-wing government think tank, this anti-China think tank. And here is the video of what she had to say, okay? Here is Gina Raimondo. Actually, I'm going to play. I'm not going to play this because there's this dramatic music in the background. But I will comment on mute. We don't need to hear her voice, but there's another video I have of her that's also equally important without the music. So here we go. Here's what she had to say. She said, "We can't let China get these chips. No way. Are we going to let them catch up? We cannot let them catch up. So we're going to deny them our most cutting edge technology. I have a $200 million budget. That's like the cost of a few fighter jets. Come on. If we're serious, let's go. Fund this operation. Like it needs to be funded. I know there are CEOs of chip companies in this audience who are a little cranky with me when I did that, because you're losing revenue. Such is life. Protecting our national security is mattering more than short-term revenue. Protecting national security matters more than short-term revenue." What she's talking about are export controls, export bans, because that's what the United States has enacted on China when it comes to the export of this semiconductor technology and other high tech needed to build and advance on these areas, especially when it comes to the development of high technology, AI, etc., which the United States doesn't want China to obtain. But I mean, it's too late. It's too late. But nonetheless, this is what Gina Raimondo is targeting. So here we have her again. All right. We have to listen to her in full here. This is at the same forum. And here's what she had to say. This is just 2 minutes. Let's listen.
Huawei's new smartphone that was released a couple of months ago. To know
When
that
I was in China.
Yes. Oh, look at that.
Thank you very much.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, when you were in China, it was a message that no matter what you do, you're not going to slow down China. It was a great move, actually. And it was even worse for Gina Raimondo because there were images all around Chinese social media talking about how she was helping promote the phone. They were trolling her.
We have to get smarter about what are the technologies, which are just where we are ahead of China. They're capable of doing very bad things, and we're going to deny the entire country.
China is capable of doing very bad things with technology. This is laughable. This is a good one because it's the United States that is very capable of doing very bad things with this technology. Let me think. Is it the United States that's spying on all of its citizens using all of the highest forms of technology, including smart technology through our computers, our phones, our televisions? That is happening. Is it the United States that's using the highest forms of technology to drop deadly weapons on people all over the world by drone? Is it the United States that is sending the highest forms of military technology to Israel to kill Palestinian children? It seems like the United States is the one that cannot be trusted with high forms of technology. But here's Gina Raimondo talking about how the United States needs to deny an entire country access to this technology, as if Gina Raimondo has any power to do that. So let's continue.
This class of equipment. Is industry on board? I mean, yes, but they're in the business of making money. Every time I take an action, it denies them revenue. My own view is that industry, newsflash, democracy is good for your businesses.
Is there anyone less charismatic than Gina Raimondo? I mean, she truly sounds like she is not in this. She truly sounds like a careerist. This is the problem with the Biden administration. Whether you're listening to Blinken or Yellen or Raimondo, they do not inspire a damn thing. No one's clapping at what she's saying. No one cares about what she's saying. This is all just political exercise. This is just a political exercise. But what Gina Raimondo is saying here is, oh, do the companies themselves, the tech companies in the United States, do they support this? Well, yeah, but they want to make money. Well, no. What is business? It's about making money, especially in a monopoly capitalist economy dominated by a very few private corporations. Those monopolies want to make more money. They don't necessarily want to be hindered from that by the United States government.
Rule of law here and around the world is good for your businesses. So it might make for a tough quarterly shareholder call, but in the long run, it's worth you working with us to defend our country's national security.
We're talking a lot about chips.
So that's a veiled threat, right? Because in the future, I don't have the clip of it, but she also says, hey, if you violate this, I'm going to own you tomorrow. Not sure that Gina Raimondo or the Commerce Department even has the power to do that, but that's the threat she's making. So here, let us continue. Let us end this here.
Are there other U.S. origin products or types of technologies that you are looking at in a similar fashion right now?
Absolutely. In biotechnology, AI models, AI products, cloud computing, supercomputing. So short answer is yes. I would say communication is a good thing, but don't confuse communication with weakness or softness. On matters of national security, we got to be eyes wide open about the threat. This is the biggest threat we've ever had. And we need to meet the moment.
The biggest threat we've ever had. See, this is why it's important for you not to sleep on the China question, even as Gaza is on fire, Ukraine is at this pivotal moment. Do not forget the China question, because Washington, the neocons, are not. The question of China, its rise, especially in the realm of economic development, is pivotal, is fundamental. It is all about curbing its rise And if you don't understand that all wars that the United States is involved in at some point, at some level, target China, then you do not understand the world situation. That's just fact. So when she says this is the biggest threat, she means China that we've ever faced.
The world needs us to manage our relationship with China responsibly to avoid escalation. We got to do all that, but make no mistake about it. China's not our friend, and we need to be eyes wide open about the extent of that threat.
China is not our friend. We need to be eyes wide open, although she sounds like she's tired and about to fall asleep. Eyes wide open about that threat.
I am ready to win, and I'm ready to do that with all of you, but it's time to open our aperture and challenge the way we've done business in every way if we're going to meet the threat China poses and if we're going to do what needs to be done with this technology.
So China is not our friend. And not only is it not our friend, China is the biggest threat that we face. This is the Commerce Secretary sounding like a general in the Pentagon. This is just how committed to war with China the United States really is. And what the conclusion here is that the United States is trying to basically strangle its own tech sector to protect so-called national security. All that means is that the United States, as Gina Raimondo clearly said, is prioritizing long-term aims of war with China over short-term profits for those who honestly, truly control the economic and really the political life of the United States over the profits of these corporations, especially in the chip sector, which rely on China's role in the supply chain to make, first of all, make the chips, but also to make money from the chips. Because if you cut these corporations off from China, you're going to cut them off from a key part of the supply chain, which is going to make these chips. This is the catch-22. It's going to make them. The U.S. is essentially not going to be a leader in that field anymore, but she does not care. And that's so clear by the way that she talks about it. Now, of course, China has something to say about this. So here's China's perspective on it. By seeking more funding, Raimondo exposes U.S.'s deep-rooted dilemma. Here's the Global Times editorial. Raimondo, who's considered to be relatively moderate towards China, stated that despite differences, the U.S. intends to further its commercial relationship with China because the U.S. believes it will not affect its national security interests. However, the statement is more of a routine matter. Then, as most of what she said that day contradicted this, and she constantly brought up national security. She described China as the biggest threat, as I said, and China is not our friend. She also said that the more likely situation is that it is not easy to determine which statement is sincere and which is not. And of course, I think that it's characteristic, according to the Global Times, of wanting both. We can see 3 points. First, the severity of Washington's abuse of national security and its dealings with China. Second, Washington's hostility and malice toward China with no intention to conceal its desire to strike at China. And third, Washington is facing a dilemma in implementing its policy of containment and crackdown against China. The third point is unintentionally exposed by Raimondo, but it is not surprising anyone. That is true. That is something we have to understand. So China is basically saying the U.S. is the one that's desperate here. And Raimondo was there basically begging those forces that have influence at this defense forum, right? Those lobbyists, those think tankers, all those people that have some influence over the way the U.S. makes policy, and pushing them to say, hey, can you get the administration, can you get the United States government to prioritize economic warfare on China because it is so imperative at the moment. That is what she's saying. That is a sign of desperation. And it is true. All right. Because this is true. And it's across the board. And I'm going to show you how it also includes Europe. Okay. Because it's not just the United States that's doing this. So here is what the Financial Times had to say in a recent article. Sorry, America, China has the bigger economy. So this is a very recent article. And The author of this article, Chris Giles, said you might have seen accurate Financial Times reporting of the U.S.'s economy remarkable annualized rate of 5.2% in the third quarter this year. Let me give you an advanced sight of what happened in November. Forget talk of rapid growth or soft landings. The U.S. economy shrank at an annualized rate around 30% in that month alone. It is so large, President Joe Biden must be toast, and it probably spells the end of the American dream. Don't worry, I have not lost any marbles. The calculation above is true, but not fair. I have taken the U.S. economic performance in November, assumed to have not done much, and calculated that in euros and renminbi after converting U.S. GDP using market exchange rates. I then annualized the result. The thing that drove the result was a near 3% fall in the dollar's value during that month. You would be right to think this is an absurd way to compare economies, but it is deeply fashionable among people who know better. Take Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England, who said that before Brexit referendum, the UK was 90% of the size of Germany's economy, but had declined 70% by late 2022. That change was caused by the relative decline in sterling. Remember European angst spread by the European Council of Foreign Relations that the EU had a bigger economy than the US in 2008, and now the US was a third larger? That was simply a rise from the US dollar from a low base. So basically what this person is talking about is that the list can go on and on about market exchange rate comparisons. So essentially talking about how GDP is often calculated and comparisons to the economy are calculated based on exchange rate comparisons of vastly different currencies. On these silly market exchange rate comparisons, many news organizations have reported that Japan will lose its spot as the world's third largest economy to Germany this year. And apparently, the US is still the world's largest economy, with China's economy failing to catch up. But, and this is important to note, a basic requirement for international comparisons is that of domestic data, international data giving similar results. That is why economics professions invented purchasing power parity exchange rates, allowing imperfect, albeit, comparisons to be made based on goods and services that money can buy. This matters for economic size and even military power. Remember, China funds the People's Liberation Army using renminbi. It does not fund it with dollars. Measured at PPP, the latest IMF data shows that China's GDP exceeded that of the US around the time Donald Trump was making America great again. It is now 22% larger. The figures make sense when you look at corroborating evidence. China's electricity generation, for example, overtook that of the US in 2010. And during the 2016-22 period, the 6 years when China's economy was supposedly making no progress compared to the US, its electricity generation grew 45%, while the United States was falling flat. So in a sense, what this author is saying is that China has already passed the United States economically. And all these indications, right? There's this contradiction, right? There's this contradiction between the United States in the Western mainstream media talking about how China's economy is failing, China's economy is declining. There's a huge contradiction between that and the fact that you have Gina Raimondo here begging for more money to strangle China's tech sector and over its overall economy, literally saying that China is the enemy. So you also had the European Union hold a summit with China in Beijing, the China-EU summit. They are in Beijing, says CNN, with a list of concerns. Will China's Xi listen? So there you have the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the Council President Charles Michel in a picture. Nonetheless, I'm not going to go over all these concerns because the Global Times will do that for me in China's reaction. But Europe has followed along the same footsteps as Gina Raimondo. Here's the Global Times editorial on this about de-risking and healthy interdependence, talking about basically Europe being a willing vassal of the United States in its tech war on China, basically taking a Raimondo approach, a softer one, albeit, but a similar approach to China, which points to this overall economic war. So the 24th EU-China summit took place on Beijing on Thursday. This was the first in-person summit since 2019. The summit offered a good opportunity for the China and EU to engage at the highest level and pursue constructive and stable EU-China relations. So here, I want to talk about what they had to say about what they believe, what China believes Europe needs to do. which is the complete opposite of what Gina Raimondo wants to do, by the way. So they said, first, dump de-risking because it's not realistic. China and Europe at different stages of development, their industrial structures are certainly complementary. This is an undeniable fact. Over the past 40 years, China's influence over the global value chain has been increasing, with manufacturing output accounting for more than 30% of the world's total. Doesn't sound like a decline, really. According to analysis by the Rhodium Group, even if a large amount of foreign direct investment seems to flow to substitute countries, in the end, only a small part of China's production and export capacity can be transferred abroad. Basically saying China's too important to give up. Second, there are fundamental differences between the U.S. and Europe in their approach to China. While the U.S. aims to maintain global hegemony and tries to contain China by building small yards and high fences, Europe has no intention or ability to confront China. There's no fundamental geopolitical conflict between China and Europe. Europe does not want to be forced to choose sides, but rather wants its relationship to be chosen with the outside world based on its own interests. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine dealt a severe blow to its strategic autonomy. Nevertheless, Europe has always been reluctant to give up balance because increased dependence on the U.S. comes at a high cost. So essentially, point number 2 is Europe stop being a vassal of the United States. And third, Europe's internal interests are diverse. Some European governments advocate de-risking, while some countries tend to continue favoring strengthening their ties with China. For example, Hungary's foreign minister even described de-risking as quote-unquote suicide for Europe. Fourth, so again, Europe is not united on this one bit, is what China is saying. Fourth, political relations are crucial. Over the past year, there have been frequent high-level exchanges from German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Emmanuel Macron of France, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, and Ursula von der Leyen coming to China. They indicate that the window for dialogue with China in Europe has not been closed. So essentially going the Raimondo route is the wrong one. Fifth, European economies have practical needs. Inflation in Europe has eased, but the economy remains sluggish. EU's trade deficit with China reached nearly 400 billion euros in 2022. So there's a lot to talk about. And Europe going the way of Raimondo is the wrong way to go. But Europe is a big part of the U.S.'s pressure point on chips. We've had admission after admission in Bloomberg talking about how China is not going to give up, abandon its support of its chip industry. And essentially, we've had admission after admission from Bloomberg economists and staffers and experts that say that these chip corporations basically understand this and they don't oppose it. So it really is the Biden administration on an island attempting to suffocate China, trying to get Europe on the same page. But the consequences are going to be grave. If Gina Raimondo, if people like her, Yellen, they get their way, the economic, whatever is left of the economic output of the United States, whatever is left of its innovative capacity, will be destroyed. So essentially, the United States is the one destroying itself through its just reckless policy, destroying itself to prepare. And this is an important point, the last point, to prepare for a hot war. Many people don't understand that when sanctions like this are leveled, even if they do not work, even if they are simply an exercise in futility, or even if they just cause temporary setbacks, like was the case in China, even if that's the case, it is still true that these are not mechanisms in and of themselves that should be looked at as a strategy. They are tactical operations that are meant to prepare the way for a broader war. And that is true with Russia, and that is also true with China. It is actually true with every single country that is sanctioned by the United States, because every single one of those countries have at some form or another been threatened, been targeted, or have experienced actual warfare. For example, Eritrea has faced aggression from the United States vis-a-vis its incursions in support for proxies in Tigray, for example. And we can go on and on and on. Any country on this, Venezuela, Venezuela has experienced coup attempt after coup attempt. I think Nicolas Maduro was almost killed. And now there's the conflict brewing around the Guyana situation, which is literally a Venezuela ExxonMobil conflict. So Venezuela is under sanctions by the United States, and it always has a military component. There is always a military component to sanctions. So when I say war is coming, I do not mean it as hyperbole. I mean it as an understanding and acknowledgement that the United States and its vassals, if it can get Europe on board, they are looking to wage economic warfare not as a strategy in and of itself, but as a tactical maneuver to better position themselves for a larger war with China, even if, and China is correct in this, even if Europe has diverse interests and it wants the economic relationship with China, the political weight of the United States on its neck does portend that Europe will be part of a hot war with China, regardless of whether it likes it or not. So the United States, regardless of how utterly just reckless any kind of move like this toward China would be, it is still pursuing it. So Gaza is happening, Ukraine is happening, Palestine, Russia, NATO conflicts. This is all so important. But at the same time, we cannot forget that it is U.S. hegemony that's on the line. It is U.S. unipolarism that's on the line. It is its dominance in all spheres, economic being the what we would call the base of this dominance, and then extending out to military, to the political dominance, to all of this, the prestige, the ideological dominance, the ability to culturally impose upon the world. All of this is waning. All of this is in decline. And that means that those that are rising, like China, especially China, as Raimondo said, have to be snuffed out. And that just because Xi Jinping and Joe Biden met, just because Wang Yi recently picked up the phone when Blinken called, it does not mean that that overall strategic imperative of the United States is gone. It's over. No, it just means that the United States can't fight all these wars. The United States is outstretched. It's overstretched. It's in decline. It's in crisis. But the dangers of war loom ahead. And Raimondo and the China EU summit are all reminders that this economic war that is raging against China is paving the way for a broader, hot conflict, which, of course, must be opposed and which should be sounding alarm bells for anyone that listens to this, that peace must be the strategic imperative of the people, and that the respect of China's self-determination, and the self-determination indeed of any country targeted by the United States, by the neocons, and by the U.S. foreign policy establishment must be the strategic imperative as well. That is it. As I ended, my dog is growling in his sleep, having some sweet dreams over there. With that said, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to get quickly to shout outs and some announcements before I go. Please do hit that like button if you haven't already. Please do hit that notifications bell. Subscribe. Thank you so much for keeping that ratio good. We have about 1,600 viewers still, 1,675, 1,400 likes. Thanks so much. Welcome again, everyone, from Rumble, from Rockfin. Thanks so much for your support. I am going to now do some quick shout outs. I'm going to try to end this at 11 on the dot, okay, because I got to be up tomorrow for Mark Sloboda. So first, the best way to support this channel is on Patreon. You can find that link in the video description. There are annual memberships, and you get a free PDF copy of my book. I'm always like left, right, left, right. Free PDF copy of my book right there. Right there. On American exceptionalism, you also get the ability to ask questions, comments, suggest guests, and all kinds of other good stuff. Early access, some audio to the videos here if you're more of a podcaster. All that good stuff can be found on Patreon. Substack is also a good option. So too is YouTube membership, and I appreciate all of those who are any one of those three, for your generous support, because that's what helps keep this work going. So furthermore, we have some really generous super chats today that I'm going to get to. We have Sam K, who said Russia called out Israel at the UN. Was that in part prior to October 7th? Israel was about to send ammo to Ukraine. Can you ask Mark tomorrow? Sure. I can ask him that. Sure, it might be good to ask about the relationship too between the Israel situation and Ukraine. We have Wadeworth with thank you so much for that generous comment. Unless we have a member, Sherry, thanks so much also for your generosity here. Michelle, thank you so much for the super sticker. Far, thank you so much. That goes really far. We have Keith, thanks so much. We have Peg. Thanks so much, Peg. I like that image there. If you did that, you are a talented person. We have Farouz Ferris. Thank you, Danny, for all you do. Thank you so much to the young Roger Waters profile picture. We have Sparky. Welcome back, Sparky. U.S. wasn't worried 25 years ago when the U.S. turned over its industrial base to China. No, and the reason why it did that, at least turned over a lot of its industrial base, not all of it, but a significant portion, was because China at that time was a cheap labor haven. It was also opening up, and its willingness to accept foreign direct investment, especially in the realm of production, helped give it the ability to do it itself. That was the China miracle there, was opening up to the world in a manner that would allow it to eventually do it itself. That is a sovereign right of any country. Anyone who wants to talk about fairness or justice in economic relations can't say anything differently. This idea that these corporatists and monopolists and so-called capitalists and all these neocons that they champion free market, free market, free market, and China isn't being fair to the free market. Well, who's to say that China, especially as a sovereign country with a sovereign government, and as well as Chinese companies, they have the right to request that they are treated in a way where they also benefit from the relationship. Guess what? If you get to have all the information, all the technology, and basically just get to park your company, your corporation, your factory in the country and take out the revenues, which, mind you, a lot of revenues taken out of China from these companies, it is a massive difference. It's not as if it hasn't been an unequal relationship. So to believe that China doesn't have the right to say, well, we want the ability to learn from this, what gives you the right to not allow it to happen? And now China's doing it better. And so you might as well kick rocks and lick your wounds, count your losses, because it's never going back. That's the way, actually, that economics works. It's never going back. That's why we're not going back to the British Empire, the domination of the British economy. That's why when China rises, surpasses the United States, as it already has, we're not going back to the United States. We're not. That's just the way things go. Economies are not, especially ones rooted in exploitation, are not permanent things. They're not. So thank you so much. So good fella. Good Lenin pick there. I like it. I know you're working hard on your channel. God bless you, brother. I want to take a minute and thank Russia for liberating Europe with heavy losses. 27 million is not a joke. Russia, Serbia, friendship. All right. Thanks, good fella. Appreciate that. All right, everybody. That's it. Michelle's. I want to shout out Michelle again. That's a really generous super sticker. Thank you so much for the 50. And thank you so much, everyone. All right, everybody. So, announcements. Okay, we got some doozies. I'm putting it back in the chat again. Mark Sloboda. If you enjoy Mark Sloboda, like I do, friend, very smart. I put the link back in the chat. I'll also put it in the video description. I think I can do that, right? Yes, I'm putting it in the video description right now. So I'm going to do that right now, and it's going to be at the top for now. And then I am going to, so you can find that in the video description now. And then I'm going to probably make it public tomorrow very early in the morning. I'm going to start getting out some notices. So you all get first access, first dibs, because you attended this show. Now, furthermore, Richard Medhurst is coming on the program, the Syrian journalist. Once was based, I believe, in the UK. Now I believe he's elsewhere. Really an expert on Gaza, Palestine, and all geopolitical developments. Will be coming on 2 p.m. Eastern, December 9th. And then the evening of December 9th, we have another special treat. It's going to be a very busy Saturday for me. We have, you won't believe it, we have Ben Norton and Carl Zah coming on the show, 9 p.m. Eastern time, reporting out of Asia, Carl in Bali and Ben in Beijing. And so you will get that as well Saturday night. So I wasn't lying when I said 4 streams in 3 nights. We have Richard Medhurst, Syrian, British journalist. We have Mark Sloboda tomorrow, Richard Medhurst Saturday afternoon, and we have Ben Norton and Carl Zah 9 p.m. Saturday. So it's gonna be a busy one, right? Gonna be a busy one, and it should be good. It should be really good. So that's all I have today, everyone. Very busy because I was, as you know, I was away for quite a bit. Didn't do a stream for about almost a week. And now I am getting back to it. And so, yeah, it should be great. It should be great. I'm going to get back to it. And then, I have one more. Scott Ritter's coming on December 13th. All right. So it's a very busy beginning of December because I do predict that closer to the Christmas holiday, closer to the New Year's, I might try to get a couple of big ones going, but it'll be more quiet. So, yeah. All right, everybody. So before we go, all right. I gotta, because I should get out of here. I should prepare. I gotta prepare for tomorrow, honestly. So I am gonna go. I am going to see you all tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern. And we are going to close with just the direction. I'm losing my train of thought. I'm going to close with saying, please like the stream, hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell. Please do also catch the link in the video description of Mark Sloboda's stream tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, and it's back in the chat again. All right. I'll try to wear a different shirt for all of you. We're going to have a fun conversation with Mark Sloboda on all things Ukraine, all things geopolitics, as much as we can get through at least. And then we're going to be back Saturday. 24 hours later, we'll be on with Richard Medhurst and then Ben Norton and Carl Zah to top it off. And all right, so like the stream, hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell, go to the video description, support this work if you're able. All of it goes back to supporting my efforts, my labor, the resources involved to keep this kind of thing going. You all are appreciated. Patreon, Substack, YouTube membership, PayPal, buy me a coffee. They're all great options. They're all in the video description. All right, everybody, I will see you all again soon. Salute, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Bye-bye.